West Rocky Mount.
We're starting a little bit late. We were over at the library. The county commissioners from Edgecombe County and Nash County and the City of Rocky Mount council members met with Jim earlier today to go over this study, and really they're the ones that started this process in terms of engaging him to do the Twin County competitive assessment. It really arose from a group of a couple of council members, a couple of commissioners from both Nash and Edgecombe County that got together with some business people to really discuss some of the issues that we had here. And in that discussion, part of what we realized is that we needed someone else to help us through this process and to try to bring us together to do that. So there were several members of that group that knew Dr. Johnson. He is from Chapel Hill. He is part of the Urban Investment Strategy Center. He's a distinguished professor from the Frank Hawkins Kenyon Institute of Private Enterprise. This is what he does for a living, not only at the university level, but in private practice also. So he's got a lot of experience in doing this. Some of the information he's going to share with you this afternoon is not going to be a surprise to anybody. You live here, you know the community, so some of this information you're going to realize you already know it. I think sometimes when you put it in graphic terms and percentages, maybe it looks a little bit different. So he's going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. You may not like it all, but it is what it is, and I think that's what we have to do to come together. With that being said, the next thing I will tell you that after our meeting with the council and both county commissioners, they have agreed to continue the next step, and that next step would be to put out an RFP. That's a request for bids for us to move forward on a 12 to 24 month study of a visioning process for Nash, Edgecombe County, as well as Rocky Mount, to not only go through the process with elected leaders, but also people from the community, and to work together to bring the two counties together. Because in all of our processes that we've been through, you can't separate Rocky Mount and Nash and Edgecombe County. We're joined together at the hip. And because we're there, we've got to work together as a region if we really want to make progress in the future. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Johnson, and he's done a great job, and we welcome him back to Rocky Mount.
For the opportunity to work with you. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I grew up in Pitt County, and my late wife was from Rocky Mount, so it's like being home to me, so I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening to share with you some of the work that we've done on the Twin Counties region. And I also want to say how important it is to be in a community where diverse groups of people recognize the importance and the need to work together in the highly volatile economy that we find ourselves in the midst of. What I was asked to do in this study, I want to focus a little bit on what we were asked to do. I want to talk a little bit about the framework or the lens that we use to study the Twin Counties community, share with you a model that we use in our work. We've done this kind of work for the past 18 to 20 years. We've probably done these kinds of studies in about 70 or 80 communities, both domestically and internationally. And we use this model, and then I want to shift to what we found and what we recommend that you think about doing in the Twin Counties region. We were asked to, one, assess the county's current competitiveness in the 21st century knowledge-based economy, and then to recommend things for enhancing the community's future competitiveness in the global marketplace. We enter and approach this problem from the standpoint that we all need to understand is that communities are a lot like businesses or firms compete. We know from empirical research that the moment a private sector firm announces that they are looking for a new place to open a business or to relocate, there are 14,000 U.S.-based communities competing for that business. That doesn't include the international communities that are competing at the same time. So you have to understand that as a community, you're competing with other communities for business recruitment, foreign direct investment, and a whole range of other things. And it is through that lens of community competitiveness that we focus on your competitive landscape. We use an approach called foresight planning, that you don't have to be, as a community, blindsided by change, but rather you can create your own healthy future, have a vision, have the foresight to create the kind of community that you really, really want down the road at some point, and then work backwards to make sure that you achieve those particular outcomes. It's called foresight planning. It's a 5-step process, and what we will be talking about today are steps 1 through 3. The first step in the process of anybody trying to evaluate where they are and where they would like to go in their community is thinking about the past. Where have you come from? If you don't know where you come from, it's pretty hard to figure out where you're going. And so you have to anchor everything that you do in some sense of the history of your community and the legacy of various kinds of forces. Secondly, you think about the presence. What's the current competitive position of your community? Who are you competing with? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where are there opportunities for new business development, job creation, economic development, and what are the threats? So we will be talking about this notion of a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that present themselves in your community. And then what about the drivers of future change? What kinds of trends that are unlikely to impact your community in the years ahead? There are 2 kinds of trends that will probably impact your community. Some of those trends are fairly predictable. We know that they are going to occur. And if you know something is going to happen and you allow yourself to be blindsided by that, it's literally your own fault, because it means you're asleep at the wheel. Then there are unpredictable kinds of changes, that things happen. And the question and challenge for most communities is, how do you minimize the likelihood of being impacted by unpredictable change? There are ways to do that, and we want to talk a little bit about those things. And once you do steps 1 through 3 of this foresight framework, then you can begin to think about, how do you construct scenarios for your community's future? What you want your community to look like? What you want it to be? And then once you develop those scenarios and brand your community according to some set of core values that you have to develop for your community, then you can develop the critical benchmarks for evaluating performance. How good are you at achieving the kinds of goals that you want to achieve for your community? If one of your goals is to reduce the school dropout rate by 50% within the next 5 years, that's a quantifiable goal, it's an achievable goal, that's a critical benchmark is where you are now, and then over the next 5 years you monitor progress, figure out who's responsible for doing that, hold them accountable to making that happen, and every year assess your competitive position in terms of achieving that goal. And if things aren't working, build a better mousetrap than the one that you have, but you are always monitoring your performance in terms of achieving your goals that you've set. In each one of these steps, there are a set of questions that we ask about your community. In step 1, thinking about the past, looking back, what kinds of changes have occurred in your community over the past decade or whatever time frame you want to specify. Did you anticipate those changes, or were you forced to respond or react to them? Are you an anticipatory community or a reactive community? How did you respond? Who was involved in deciding how ultimately you responded to these changes? Are you an inclusive community when it comes to decision making, or is there a few people who make the decisions and the rest of us are at the whims of those decision makers? What impact do these changes have on your current position, and were these changes good or bad for your community? That's what you ask about in looking at the past. When you talk about the present, it's that notion of your competitive positioning. As I indicated, it's that SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities and threats? Each one has a set of questions in terms of your strengths. What does your community do well? Does it have a clear strategic vision? That is, do you have a roadmap to the healthy outcomes or future that you desire? Do you have an entrepreneurial orientation? Is the glass always half full even when it's empty or half empty? Do you produce a healthy environment in which to live and do business? In terms of weaknesses, what kinds of things could be improved in your community? What do you not do so well or do poorly? Do you have the finances to upgrade your infrastructure and the like? And do you have poor debt or cash flow in your community? In terms of opportunities, what kinds of favorable circumstances are facing your community that you have a strategic opportunity to take advantage of? What are the interesting trends out there that are going on, and how can you strategically position the community to take advantage of them? And are you advanced in technology in such a way that you can leverage the knowledge-based economy of the 21st century? Likewise, what kinds of threats does your community face? Threats in terms of obstacles. Who are your competitors and what are they doing? Most people don't look at their communities and think that they have other communities that they compete with, but you do have a set of competitors. I assure you they know what you're doing. If you don't know what they're doing, you're asleep at the wheel, because they're going to leverage whatever you don't do very well as a comparative advantage for them in the economic development marketplace. So you need to know who your competitors are, and you need to know what they're doing. You also should have a sense of your demographic and economic conditions and how those things are changing locally. Is technology threatening your community's competitiveness? What policies are operating at the state and federal level that may impact your community? And if so, how are they likely to impact your community? And how long will they likely to impact your community? We've been doing this, as I indicated, for close to about 20 years, and we use what is called a civic entrepreneurial model of community competitiveness that says any community has about 6 different kinds of cultural capital assets, and that these assets interact in a complex way to create that healthy competitive community. Or if you have less of these kinds of capital assets, you end up not being a very healthy community. Let me define each one of them for you. Polity capital are the commitments from local government organizations to continuously strive to enhance the health and socioeconomic well-being of local residents and to advance the competitiveness of the community in the local marketplace. You might look at that definition of polity capital and say all communities do that. I'm here to tell you today that all communities do not do that. I was just doing some work in a community about less than a month ago, and the community was trying to make a decision of whether or not they were going to raise taxes to improve education in the local community. And a group of 1,000 people walked into the meeting called the Will of the People and shut the whole meeting down. Basically, they were arguing, we don't see the value of education because we're all empty nesters and we don't have a dog in that fight. The answer is, that's the wrong answer, because you do have a dog in the fight. If you're an aging empty nester, who's the next generation of people that are going to take care of your old butt? You need that talent to propel you in the years ahead. And so it's short-sightedness like that, so it's not, you can't take it for granted that these things are going to occur automatically. So the context in which decisions are made are very, very important. Physical capital, there are 2 kinds of physical capital assets that the communities have more or less of. The first kind is called built physical capital. This is the infrastructure that you invest in to build in your community. It's about the network of highways, railways, airports, telecommunication systems, water and sewer systems, and walking, jogging, and biking trails that constitute the infrastructure of your community. Then there are natural physical capital assets. These are the God-given kinds of assets that exist in your community. Your ecosystems of goods and services, which include water resources, fisheries, air quality, arable land, forests, and reserves of coal, natural gas, and other minerals. All of these are assets that can be leveraged in some way or another in terms of your competitiveness in the global marketplace. Financial capital. There are 2 kinds of capital, financial capital assets. Traditional capital, forms of banks, credit unions, and things of that nature. But usually the most competitive communities also have non-traditional forms of capital in the form of community development, venture capital funds, social innovation funds, and a range of other alternative kinds of capital assets that are designed to promote future economic growth and development. Human capital. Individuals with the requisite education, training, and soft skills to compete for jobs in a highly integrated world economy. It's pretty straightforward, but in many instances, communities don't have the necessary capital, human capital assets that are needed in the global marketplace today, and to attract the kinds of firms that pay good wages, have good jobs, and things of that nature. Cultural capital. Two kinds of cultural capital assets that exist in communities, more or less. There are places, events, rituals which promote community, and then there are individual values, attitudes, and beliefs about current life chances and future opportunities in the local community. That's that cultural capital asset base for a community. It's about place and the history and significance of the place, and it's about people and their values and their outlook about what it takes to succeed in the local community. And then there's social capital, resources, personal and institutional resources through which individuals maintain their social identity and receive emotional support, material aid and services, information, and new social contacts. The best example of social capital are the kinds of mediating institutions that exist in a community that encourage the disadvantaged to pursue mainstream avenues of social and economic mobility, and that discourage them from engaging in dysfunctional antisocial behaviors. If you've ever seen Denzel Washington talk about his success and future in the world, he always talks about the Boys and Girls Club as being that mediating institution that was responsible for his success. Interestingly enough, in an economic downturn, the first thing to get cut are these mediating institutions, but they play such a valuable role in society, and most competitive and most sustainable communities recognize the value of those kinds of institutions as being part of their social capital assets, and they develop them. So that's the framework that we use, the lens that we impose on your community, and I want to begin by looking at your community through a demographic lens and an economic lens. What do you look like right now? Now, this is from the outside world. You may think you look a little different. We're happy to have that conversation with you at the end. North Carolina is one of the most rapidly growing states in the nation. Our population increased by about 16.1% during the first decade of the new millennium. We added about 1.3 million people to our population in the state of North Carolina during that period. Here in the Twin Counties area, you all added 3,500 people to your population, growth rate of about 2.5%. In other words, when you look at the state of North Carolina, you look at it at the county level, what you get is a very uneven pattern of demographic growth. If you're near water, if you're near the mountains, or you're in the I-40, I-85 corridor, life is pretty good. In other places, you're usually slow growing. You're one of the other places, but there is hope because there are about 19 counties in North Carolina that have a biologically declining population. The death rate exceeds the birth rate. You're not there yet, but don't blink. When you unpack the Twin Counties region, what you see is that there is population loss in Edgecombe County, 6.3% loss, but Nash County grew by about 8%. So when you look at the 7,000 people gained in Nash County and the 3,000 lost in Edgecombe County, it gives you some sense of why you had a net growth of about 3,500 people during that period. So you have your slow-growing kind of population in comparison to what's going on in the state of North Carolina. And when you look at the incorporated places in Edgecombe and Nash counties, what you will see in Edgecombe County, all of the incorporated places lost population except Princeville and Rocky Mount Stratus, both counties. So Rocky Mount grew by about 757 people. Princeville's number needs explanation. When the 2000 census was taken, most of the people in Princeville weren't there because of the floods. And so when you come later, they're back and it looks like big growth, but it's really not big growth. It's just it's a unique kind of circumstance. But what you will see is that every community is losing population, a kind of emptying out kind of trend if you look at that region. If you look at the communities in Nash County, you see a slightly reverse pattern, every community growing, albeit very slowly, in Nash County, with the exception of Whitaker's, which straddles both counties. It lost population, but the rest of them, and I've included Rocky Mountain in both because of its straddling the two communities. All of those communities grew, but as you can see, none of them grew or setting the world on fire as being destinations for a large growth. But there are some interesting kinds of dynamics going on in terms of what's the source of the growth in your population. To be quite frank and plain, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't have a Hispanic population, you wouldn't have grown any. Wouldn't have grown at all. 87% growth for North Carolina in the Hispanic population, 56% growth for the region as a whole, 53% growth in Edgecombe County, 57% growth in the Hispanic population in Nash County. Your white population declined by 3% in the Twin Counties regions as a whole, about 8.6% or 9% in Edgecombe County, and about 1% in Nash County. If you didn't have these non-white immigrant groups in the county, you would be in the negative kind of category. And so what's the source of your growth are the newcomers, Hispanic newcomers for the most part, and other people of color that are driving change. You have an interesting dynamic, though, because if you look at the Twin Counties region and look at it demographically, it's about 50-50. 50% white, 50% non-white. But when you begin to unpack the region and look at it by a county level, what you will see is that Rocky Mountain, Edgecombe County are predominantly black, and the Twin Counties region as a whole and Nash County are predominantly white. In other words, you have a huge amount of segregation by race and by class in your set of communities, and what makes admirable this effort to try to form and constitute a single region is understanding the context in which you're trying to do this work of collaboration. But here's what's interesting about your region. Everybody talks about how, you got a brain drain problem and the like, and you do. But if you look at migration, these are data from the IRS. Every year the IRS produces a migration file. When you file your taxes, if this year you have a different address from what you had last year, they follow you and they create this migration file. And if you look at the Twin Counties region, what you will see is that you have net in-migration of 134 people during that time period, and a lot of in-migration from another state into the state. While people are leaving the Twin Counties region going elsewhere in the state of North Carolina, you have a lot of people outside the state coming in, and some of them are settling in the Twin Counties region, and most of them are coming from the Northeast and settling in this region. And what's interesting about it is they're settling in both Edgecombe and Nash counties. But you also are getting net in-migration from the Midwest, the West, and from abroad. You're this magnet for people coming from all of these places. And what's interesting about that is the folk coming in from the Northeast earn more money than the people who are leaving this region going to the Northeast. In other words, the folk coming here got juice. Okay? Look at it. The people moving to the Twin Counties region from the Northeast earn on average close to $2,000 per capita more than the people who are leaving. And in Edgecombe County, it's $4,148. Now, who are these people? Who do you think they are? Huh? Retirees. These are what are called home place migrants. These are people who left this region years ago and now are voting with their feet and doing what? Coming back home. It's called home place migration. And they got money, which contributes to what? Your tax base. And they come with entrepreneurial acumen. So there's some good news in all of this, and you need to understand that that is going on. It's going to figure heavily into our recommendations a little bit later on. Here's the bad news. Sorry to be a bearer of bad news. when you look at who's coming and who's leaving by age, you got a slight problem. What you will note is the 25 to 44-year-old population declined by 15% for the region, 21% in Edgecombe County, about 14% in Nash County. Where's your growth? 45 to 64 and 65 plus. That 45 to 64, those of us are the boomers. We're part of the post-World War II hormonal rush. It was our fathers who went off to World War II and came back home and got busy, producing 80 million of us. That 64-year-old turned 65 on January 1st. It's called the Silver Tsunami, and it's about to hit. Now, what do you got? You got an aging population and what? A smaller and a shrinking pool of people who are what? Working every day, creating the tax base for your community. That means you have a high dependency ratio in the community, where the non-working population or the dependent population is a high rate of that dependency in your community, and you can see it here. Look at the old age dependency ratio. For North Carolina, it's 19 seniors for every 100 working age people, but in the Twin Counties region, it's what? 26 seniors for every 100 working age people. Edgecombe is 18, it's about 25 in the Nash County community. In terms of the ratio, the total dependency ratio is the number of kids under 5 and the number of people 65 or older. So there's 64 young folk and old folk for every 100 working people. That dog won't hunt but for so long. Okay? You need to understand that. Okay? And in the state of North Carolina, if you look at the ratio of seniors to children, there are 1.8 seniors for every child for North Carolina. There are 2.4 seniors for every child under 5 for the Twin Counties region, 1.6 to 1, Edgecombe, and 2.2 to 1. In other words, you have a huge dependency and an enormous burden on your working age population to do what? Support that larger population and your community and the like. Let's look at employment really quickly. This is a proprietary database that we have. And if you look at North Carolina in terms of total jobs created, jobs lost, and net employment from 1990 to 2007, I have North Carolina, the Twin Counties region, Edgecombe, and Nash counties here. What you will see is that for the state as a whole, 6.5 million jobs were created during that period. But you will also notice that about 5.5 million jobs were lost during that period. The difference between jobs created and job loss gives you net change in your employment base. So the state created about 995,000 jobs during that period. Okay. In the Twin Counties region, you created about 87,000 jobs during that period, but you lost 88,000. So you had what? Net loss of about 1,300 jobs, okay? In Edgecombe County, you created about 30,000, 29,606, but you lost 38,000, so -8 loss here. The flip was in Nash County. You created about 57,000 jobs, you lost 50,000. And so you gained about 7,000 jobs. The difference between the -8 and 7,000 is a -1,337 jobs for the region. Now, I screwed up the next slide, so let me just tell you what's going on. If you look at job creation in this region, what you will find is that you're not creating enough firm bursts, new jobs, new firms that create jobs to propel your community. And the kinds of jobs that you're losing in the community, the old line manufacturing firms used to employ large numbers of people. The new firms that you're recruiting don't employ that larger number of of people, and they require a radically different skill set from the old ones, so it raises all series of questions. I apologize for screwing up the next two slides, so I'm just going to skip over them. They're all in the report. And what you need to know is that we got to think more about an entrepreneurial economy here. But the last thing we did in terms of looking at the lens for you today is the state of the human condition in this region. And there's an international indicator called the Human Development Index, HDI, that is used globally and all over the United States to focus on the state of the human condition. The index ranges from 0 to 10, and the closer to 10 you are, the better off in terms of your community. And that human index is made up of 3 sub-indexes. It's made up of a health index, which is really a measure of life expectancy at birth. It's made up of an earning index, median earnings in your community, and an education index that has 2 pieces to it: educational attainment and school enrollment, with the high weight to educational attainment. What you will see is that the Human Development Index for North Carolina is about 4.6. For the United States, it's about 5.1. So North Carolina lags the nation in a considerable way. But look at the twin counties. Your Human Development Index is about 3.9. So there's a considerable difference between the state of the human condition here and in the state as a whole. Your health index is an even wider disparity. It's about 4.7 for North Carolina. For the twin counties, it's about 3.8. Why? Because Edgecombe County has the lowest life expectancy at birth of any county in the nation. Okay? Lowest life expectancy at birth of any county in the nation. The average person born in Edgecombe County lives to age 70. For the state of North Carolina, it's close to 76, 77, 78. Okay? You see your earnings index narrowed. Education index is significantly kind of wide. The reason is because probably 2/3 of the population has at best a high school education. Okay. So we're going to come back to that. It's not a pretty picture. And when you look at these indicators by race, this gives you a reason why it's not a pretty picture. This is for your Twin Counties region. The Human Development Index for whites is 4.7. It's about 2.8 for blacks. Your health index is 4.2 versus 2.2. I'm going to be honest with you. Your health conditions looks like a third world country. That score is not radically different from third world countries. Okay? Your earnings index, you see the gap. And you see the gap in your education index. Now, the thing you have to ask yourself a question about is, who's going to locate here if you got those kind of health conditions? In other words, you can't divorce the human condition from your ability to do what? Recruit business or to grow and thrive as a community. Okay? Just register that. Keep it in mind as we go on. Now, we did this SWOT level analysis for you all. One part of it, we didn't talk to anybody. We just gathered our own information about you. And then we conducted a series of focus groups and telephone, actually they were telephone interviews, one-on-one with key community leaders. I want to share with you what we found. What are you known for? What are the strengths of this community? Well, first and foremost, strategic location. You're roughly halfway between New York and Florida, and at the intersection of I-95 and I-64. There's only one community can be there, and it's you. 60% of the population is within an 8-hour trucking distance of this community. You can't buy that, ladies and gentlemen. It's kind of like in basketball, you can't buy height. Well, you can buy it, but
very expensive.
It's very expensive, that's right. So you got a comparative advantage, and the other advantage you have is that you recognize that you have that comparative advantage, so you've been willing to invest in the infrastructure to make sure that you're in an accessible location. Your location, you're proximate to ports in Virginia and North Carolina. You're accessible to airports and other kinds of land-based intermodal transportation nodes all over the state and the like. It's a great kind of location. You have an endowment of building natural capital assets that you recognize, and you make concerted efforts to leverage them in the economic development marketplace. Leverage them in terms of accessibility and also in terms of tourism and the like. I think another plus is you have a very, very supportive business environment here, business climate. And that's thanks to your economic development organizations and the like. A holdover from the manufacturing area, you have a very dedicated workforce, people not afraid to work hard here, ready to work. You have an infrastructure of education and training programs that are oriented and make concerted efforts to retool your citizenry, to position them for new jobs in a restructured economy. You have a whole series of historical and cultural attractions. What is it, 60-some kinds of facilities around here on the National Registry? Not trivial, not trivial. And I think the reason that I'm here tonight is a plus for you. You're making a concerted effort to sustain regional collaboration. And as I look at you, when you say, what are you doing in economic development? I see several things out there. One, I think there's a concerted effort to promote the region as a global logistics and distribution hub. You got this comparative advantage of a location, and you're trying to leverage it in the marketplace. Lots of people, ladies and gentlemen, talk about broadband and being connected on the web. Understand one thing, the web can't move a box. Okay? You need the infrastructure to be able to move information, goods, and services in a highly efficient way, particularly goods and services. That's important. Secondly, I think you have lots of investments in business and industrial parks. The operative term in terms of industrial recruitment is shovel-ready kinds of facilities and the like, and I think you recognize that and making investments in those things. I think you're trying to leverage the natural and cultural capital assets, including heritage sites, to promote tourism. There's a lot of attention to pursuing green business enterprises, adaptive reuse of brownfield developments, and lots of attention about developing new business clusters for your community. So it's an interesting package of strategies for growing jobs and economic opportunity in your local region. Unfortunately, there are some weaknesses, and sometimes they're the flip of what I see as the strengths. As I look at what you're trying to do in economic development, it strikes me as a little incoherent in terms of the approach. Lots of things are going on, and it feels to me like you're trying to throw everything up against the wall and see what is going to stick. Distribution hub for logistics, technology corridor, life science corridor, things, I mean, some of them I don't think you have a comparative advantage in, and you would have to convince me otherwise. The life science corridor or cluster I don't get, because I can tell you, if I'm from the Triangle area, I'm making the same argument. And I'm going to say, they ain't got it down there. We got the juice here in the Triangle with all these scientists and the like. Doesn't mean that you can't do it. When I look at it, it just seems a little bit too diffuse. What are your comparative advantages? What things, what can you do given the kind of comparative advantages you have in the marketplace? I don't think you effectively leverage the internet for economic development marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing any cheaper than internet marketing. You can't buy anything any cheaper. But when I look at all of the communities here, you got 3 chambers of commerce in a community with 95,000 people, and none of them talk to one another. You know, you gotta figure out how to link things together and at least talk to one another every now and then. Seems to be a lack of unified or shared identity and brand. What are you known for in the marketplace? When people say the Twin Counties region, what comes to mind? That's your brand. What is it? I don't even need the debt trust. Talk about the next one. Yeah, high utility rates. It's a game changer, ladies and gentlemen. It's a major deterrent to economic growth and development. And I can talk about it because I own a property here, and I can tell you to shoot everybody. I know it's not your fault, but locally unwanted land uses, what are known as LULUs, brownfields and the like, about 60 of them around from the inventory. You can turn that into a comparative advantage. We'll talk about how you can do that in just a moment. Continue with weaknesses, low levels of educational attainment. That's 60% of people who have best high school education. You're trying to lure, be an advanced technology community. You look at some of the firms and they say that they recruit workers from a 60-mile radius. Anybody know how far 60 miles is from here? So if I'm 60 miles from here and I work in this community, what am I going to do at 5 o'clock? Better yet, on Friday when I get paid, where I'm going? It's not going to be here. It'll be here. Skills mismatch, so you get this skills mismatch with the kinds of jobs you're trying to bring in and the people and their education portfolio, they don't match up. Your school systems are improving, but still poor test scores, declining enrollment, and brain drain. The people who do succeed do what? Vote with their feet out of the community. What was it? Something like 38% of the students took the SAT. Can't compete that way. High rates of unhealthy and risky behaviors. I got to get to my notes on this. Smoking, obesity, binge drinking, and sexually transmitted diseases, teen births, all high. 29% of children obese before they reach kindergarten. Life expectancy at birth, lowest for Edgecombe County in the state. The cost of unhealthy behaviors in Edgecombe County is $84 million annually. In Nash County, it's $149 million annually. Okay. And if these folk were to make it to their retirement years, the cost of unhealthy behaviors would be $1.6 billion annually in Edgecombe and $2.5 billion annually in Nash. And if, trust me, firms today use as a key destination selection decision the quality of health in your environment as a surrogate measure for what? Healthcare costs and productivity costs. There's not a firm that when you're trying to recruit that doesn't know the obesity rate for your community. They know your BMI data better than you do. And if you're too fat, they ain't coming. And if they do, they're going to bring their workers with them. Okay? So these are game changers, folks, that you have to look at and think about. So these high rates of health and risky behaviors, if you look at the report, when you add race to it, the disparities are even worse, and you're going to have to solve these problems if you're going to compete in the marketplace. But there are opportunities. There are opportunities. One, I think you have the opportunity to build on the momentum to create a shared regional identity and brand. You're already in the process. We're in a terrible economic downturn, but I would encourage you to continue working on this initiative. There are all kinds of excuses to bury your head in the sand and say, we're not going to do it. I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think now is the time to be more aggressive, if anything, on this kind of idea, because it is a game changer for you if you get it right. There are enough communities out there screwing it up. If you get it right, you can win at this game. So it can be a major game changer for you. Secondly, I think you have an opportunity to coordinate coordinate web-based economic development, branding, and marketing. All those different kinds of websites out there that don't talk to one another. You need a common thread on all of them, and you need to be supportive of one each other. You know, 3 chambers of commerce that don't talk to each other. Don't say anything about each other. And if I say something about you, too bad if you don't say anything about me. It sends the wrong message in the marketplace. It sends the wrong message. I think you have the opportunity to pursue market-based approaches to poverty alleviation, job creation, and community development. What that means is that you have an opportunity to look at all of the social ills, the state of the human condition in this community as business opportunities and as entrepreneurial opportunities to create jobs to solve pressing societal problems. Some people call it social entrepreneurship, some people call it social innovation and the like. Lots of money out there for that today. $50 million social innovation fund at the federal level today. There's no reason that you can't do this. You just have to have the will and to do it. I think you can leverage your demographic realities to recruit talent and generate jobs. What I always say is you're good at recruiting plants. You ought to augment that with strategy and providing incentives to recruit people. Because you need talent in this community. You need young, enthusiastic, highly motivated talent in this community. And so you've got to figure out, how do I incent people to come? Some of them have roots in this community. They have what is called location-specific capital. They have family here who are aging and they're moving back to take care of them. I'm sure some of you have seen the UNC TV story on home place migration to Edgecombe County. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to look at it because they profile 3 families who have returned to this community. One family they profiled was a young lady who moved back to Edgecombe County from Los Angeles. She was Magic Johnson's chef for 20 years. That's entrepreneurial talent, folks. You got to tap into what your community affords you. You have this destination and it's important and you need to leverage it. And if you don't have enough quality teachers in your school system, maybe you ought to think about investing in housing incentives or building condos and the like and incenting people to come. Universities have been doing that for 1,000 years. My first job was at UCLA in Los Angeles, California. When I went out there, I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, but the university bought the first 3 houses that I owned. Because that was the only way they were going to recruit and retain talent, was to invest. One of the biggest real estate developers in the whole metropolitan area. That is not unheard of in this state. Hertford County has done it to recruit and to lure talented young teachers to their community. You can think about it here. Recruiting people along with recruiting plans. I think you got to broaden workforce development efforts here. You all spend a lot of time in trying to train people to work for other folk who may or may not come. I think this community was built on an entrepreneurial platform. You need to get back to the basics. And it needs to start early in your K20 education system. You got to allow kids to think crazy thoughts. 9 out of 10 may be bona fide crazy, but one of them may be the revolution that transformed this community. And never assume that there's a high correlation between entrepreneurship and years of school completed. I can give you 2 or 3 folk who never finished anybody's college, but everybody would like to be on their bank account today. Bill Gates, Michael Dell, and the list goes on. We gotta unleash that entrepreneurial acumen, and you got to transform the K20 education system to make it happen. You have an opportunity to continue to pursue brownfield redevelopment and adapt to reuse projects. You're doing some of that, given the history of the tobacco industry and manufacturing. You're adapting and reusing buildings and the like, and cleaning up some brownfields and the like. I think you can do more of that. And consistent with my notion earlier, you've got to promote this entrepreneurial culture to create jobs and recognize the importance of all of that. But there are some threats out there, and you need to be aware of them. You cannot have blinders on. You need to be understand them. I think your unemployment rate is incredibly high, and the disparities in unemployment. I mean, the last number I saw, about 14% unemployment. That's scary. And the disparities are even greater than that. That's a major threat to the sustainability and the stability of your community. That low level of educational attainment is going to be hard to recruit the kind of high-tech kind of economy that you want. You got to focus. But the problem is, I think you focus your attention in terms of workforce development on high school kids and dislocated workers. Ladies and gentlemen, the seeds to the jobless problem start much earlier in the education system, and you got to start much earlier in preparing kids to make sure that they don't fail or falter later on. So it's got to start much earlier. Perceptions of crime, high. You get bad press all over the place, in places, some places that you wouldn't even think. Gentleman's Quarterly, Forbes magazine, and all. Folks read that stuff, okay? And it's not all untrue, but it's not all true. You get painted with a broad brush. If you get painted with the wrong brush, you know whose fault that is? It's not the writer's fault, it's your fault, because you're not in the business of promoting your community in the economic development marketplace like it should be. I'm not going to mention the high utility problem anymore, but one more time, you got to fix it. Contentious political relations. If you're fighting all the time, you can't make decisions at the speed of business, as a firm, I'm not coming here. Okay. Understand that everybody in this state is under the wrath of a nearly $4 billion budget deficit. So you're not only competing with Wilson, you're competing with us in the Triangle area today. So those large metro areas that you look to and like, understand that you're competing with them. When you start talking about bioscience, understand we're talking about it too. And sometimes we may have bigger horses than you do because we bio-created them somehow. State and federal budget cuts, we all are faced by those things. They are threats for you. How you manage this storm is going to be really, really critical. So what do you need to do? What do we suggest? Number one, I think you have to develop strategies to rebrand the Twin Counties region as a sustainable community. What do I mean by sustainability? It is a triple bottom line construct that, or a three-legged stool. Yes, you want to pursue economic development opportunities with a profit motive in mind, but you also want to do it in an environmentally sensitive way. But most importantly, you also want to do it in this community with a lens of social justice and equity in mind. You have been relatively successful in this community in retaining some industry and bringing new industry in. But I think the thing you have to look at is the disparities between Edgecombe and Nash, the racial disparities, and the enormous health disparities that exist in this community. If you don't fix those problems, you will never achieve where you have to go. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we're in a people business, okay? And you got to fix that problem. That's why the triple bottom line sustainability lens is an important one. If you embrace it, lots of people talk about sustainability today as being sustainable places, but when you look at them very carefully, what you will see is that they're concerned with the profit motive, and they'll talk about environmental sustainability. Where they all fail is on the social equity dimension. You have an opportunity to have first mover advantage in doing it right. Number two, make talent recruitment a core element of the sustainable community rebranding effort. And the place to start is with the enormous amount of talent, that homegrown talent that you have out there, because this is a strategic time for people to come back home. Why? Because they have aging parents and grandparents and great-grandparents in this community. And many of them are going to come back to do what? Take care of those folks. I did it 20 years ago. That's the reason I came back to North Carolina, because I had an aging grandmother and aging parents. And more people are doing that, and you can create the conditions for even more to come back and bring their enormous assets to your community, entrepreneurial assets, and a range of other kinds of human capital that you can build on. Re-engineer K20 education so that the system better equips current and future workforce with the skills they need in the highly evolving global economy of the 21st century. Expand. Notice I said K20 education. Basically from the womb to the tomb. You got to do it. It's lifelong, it's continuing education, it never stops, because the only common thing you're going to be faced with in the years ahead is change, and it's going to occur at ever breakneck speed. You're going to have to constantly reinvent yourself, and you have to create the conditions in this community for people to do that. You have to create that seamless web of opportunities. Fourthly, you have the opportunity to nurture and grow your elder care economy. You have a huge aging population. Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing that does not lend itself or that will have to be changed, or won't have to be changed in the years ahead to accommodate an aging population. Everything from the way we build houses, every house is going to have at least one, has to have at least one entryway with 0-step grade. The way we label products and services, the way we position them in stores. Right now we're on a big box movement, big box stores. Well, if you have a boomer population of 80 million strong that are aging, what are they going to do with a big box? So we're having to change everything. If you saw the New York Times this past Sunday, the Wall Street Journal this past Saturday, it was on the elder marketplace. And if you look at somebody like CVS, you might probably haven't even noticed this. They've redone all their shopping aisles to make them wider and what? To lower the height of their counters. Why? Because as you age, your vision gets bad and everything else. And you have to accommodate people in the workforce. It's a huge opportunity, this elder care economy, and most people are not paying attention to it. But again, this is something that's right in your midst. You don't have to recruit anybody to make this happen. You have to create the conditions for it to thrive and prosper in the local economy. Bad thing again. You know number 5. Number 6, you got to leverage the power, influence, and global reach of the World Wide Web to promote the Twin Counties' shared identity and brand and economic development marketplace. First of all, you got to create that shared identity and brand. But ladies and gentlemen, the world is your oyster. And you can't get it any cheaper than if you leverage your website to make it happen. Remember, when you go back and look at your website for your community, it's a mirror image of you. And if I go on it, and there's a link that says under construction, you know where you are? You're like Freddy in the Superfly movie. You're dead. Or I go on your website and you got 2005 data on there for your demography. You know how many people died since 2005? You're not competitive. And it says it right there. What company is going to make a decision to come here on 2005 data? They don't do it. Understand that's what you look at. And the connectivity among the various entities in your community. Number 7. You all got a bunch of communities in the Twin County region that don't think they belong to you all. They think they're above you all. They don't even think they're above part of your community. They see themselves as being part of Raleigh or some other place. But you know what? Understand, whether you like it or not, there's this community called Rocky Mount, and it's the 20-ton gorilla in the theater. As Rocky Mount goes, so does you. Okay? So understand that you're all connected, joined at the hip, whether you like it or not. That's what metropolitan communities are about. They have a hub. It's called a central city. And I don't care how small you are and disconnected from it, you are joined at it whether you like it or not. And you're only as strong as your weakest link. Okay. In other words, a form of enlightened self-interest for all of you to work together in all of the incorporated towns and some of the unincorporated places, but understand that Rocky Mount is a significant and important element there that you cannot ignore and close your eyes and claim it's not there. It does no good to say, talk about across the tracks and all of that. They're there, they mean something, but you gotta eliminate those tracks if you're gonna compete globally. So I think there has to be some kind of team building exercise among elected officials and other folks to align platforms, processes, and people. And it starts with a set of core values. When we talk about the Twin Encounters region, what are your core values? What do you stand for? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for what? Anything. Okay. See, it does no good to say you value diversity and then I look at your data and cross the tracks. You really mean cross the tracks here? Okay. It's time to do diversity, not talk diversity. Okay. It's time to eliminate health disparities just because it's not in your neighborhood. Yes, it is. And just because you're an empty nester and the school system's not performing, if you think you don't need to invest in it, you just ask yourself questions, speed dial ahead 4 or 5 years and ask yourself who's going to take care of you when you get old. Don't say your kids because they aren't. You got to develop an all-stakeholder inclusive Twin Encounters region. Vision, mission, and core values. When I go on your website, the first thing I should see is your core values. What does this community stand for? It should be posted there. And I should be able to judge everything you do based on those core values. And ladies and gentlemen, don't think you can fool anybody today in the global marketplace, because I can tell you some of the common things that people do to try to fool people about their community. One of them, and my favorite one, is for communities to post the average SAT score in their communities indicative of the quality of their education system. What they don't tell you is what percentage of the kids are not even taking the SAT. Okay? And the other one is, I go to the website, they drug every diverse person off the street they can find and put them on the website. Say, we all get along. Disparate kind of interaction that you've had in this community is there. I firmly believe, having grown up east of I-95, I firmly believe this is God's country. Because when I look at the leadership of this state, a lot of it came from east of I-95. And so to me, we are wasting a lot of human capital and talent when we don't figure out how to work together. To me, that's the name of the game, and I think we're up to it. My minister at my church is also from east of I-95, and he told me one day, he says, you know what, wise men come from the east. And he also wise women too. Okay. We need to build upon that construct and make our communities look like that. We can win at this game. But that's the 20-ton gorilla, that's the challenge that we have as I see it. You have the right to shoot me down if you want to. Just understand that I shoot back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And when I started, I said you were going to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we expected, when he finished his report, to be an honest report about our community, where we are now, and with some recommendations about what we should be doing. His last recommendation here is develop an all-stakeholder inclusive Twin Counties region, vision, mission, and set of core values is our next step. That is what the county commissioners and the city council agreed to do today at our meeting, is to go to the next step and get an RFP out to get people to apply for this opportunity to work with the city of Rocky Mount, Nash, and Edgecombe counties. The other thing he talked about were the outlying areas outside of Rocky Mount, and the areas that we're talking about would be Nashville, Spring Hope, Bailey, Caneta, Leggett, areas in Edgecombe County as well, to bring some of those outlying areas of the counties together as well. And those are all things that we're working on right now. So I want to commend the commissioners and the city council for making that decision today. This is the first step, but we've got to take that first step to get to the next step. But if we all work together, and I think he said we have a lot of great human capital here in the city of Rocky Mount in both Nash and Edgecombe County, and we want to leverage that. And you're the people that we need to help support this initiative, and we hope that going forward, we'll continue to have conversation with Dr. Johnson and work with all of you to try to overcome some of the issues that you heard about today. I want to thank you on behalf of the city and the counties for being here today. This report that he's got, and we didn't make one for everybody here, but if you want a report, you can do one of two things. If you want a report like this, if the city makes it for you, we have to charge you. But if you want a copy of it, you can call the city, and I think that number is somewhere. I'll give it to you in just a second. 972-1325, and we'll email you a copy of it so you can get an electronic copy. It won't cost you anything. But that's 972-1325, and we'll get you a complete copy of the report. I want to thank Dr. Johnson and his team for working with us. I think it's an important step. Like I said, we've got to know where we are before we know where we're going to go, but it's a good first step for us. Not only is the report good, it's the fact that we're working together as a region, and that's really important for us if we want to become successful in